Okay, so we've been waiting for a few weeks to bring this interview to you, and chatting today with Shea McAleer, who works with Kingsbridge in Belfast and also with our athletes here in Queens. He's one of the top physios in Ireland. And Shea, how's it going today?
Not too bad, Conor, and yourself. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure. Great to chat to you. Maybe just get you to start by outlining your various titles and some of the clubs and teams that you're working with at the minute.
Yeah, so like my role at the minute with Kingsbridge is I'm the lead physio with Kingsbridge of the Kingsbridge Physiotherapy Clinic. So based in Queens PC. So we're aligned with Kingsbridge Private Hospital and their whole orthopedic organisation. So my role in there, as I said, is lead physiotherapist. I also look after the Queen's Sport, the elite athlete program, so I'm lead physio with those guys. And then also looking after a lot of the performance athletes as well with Queens. I'm also involved with Armagh GAA as their lead physio for the last 2 seasons, which keeps me nice and busy, especially in the current times. So yeah, that's where I am at the minute.
Yeah, so you have an awful lot on your plate, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy balancing all those priorities over the last few months with probably everyone demanding your services and very limited, I suppose, scenarios in which you can interact with people in person. Like,
yeah, it has been really, really challenging over the last number of months with the lockdown, and we went through a full array of emotions from initially whenever the lockdown was imposed. We spent the first week or two just completely catastrophizing about what was going to happen, and just didn't know what was going to happen with the clinic and the patients. And we eventually had a good chat with a mentor of mine who I would use as a sounding board for problems and stuff, and they were really useful in trying to realign the thought process around trying to focus on how we can try to manage through this difficult period, and try to focus on what we can control and not panic too much about other things. So that was with the clinic side of things, and we focused a lot on trying to stay in contact with our clients and trying to still be some form of support for them, rather than, we had the option of going on furlough because there was no real clinic for us to work in, but we really wanted to actually stay in touch with them, and it actually worked out quite well, and it was quite a challenge to adapt to. Obviously we went away from doing face-to-face consultations. We moved over to more digital consultations and more remote. So we were doing video sessions or telephone sessions, and that was an entire whole new learning process as to that there's a definite technique and a system and an art to that itself, as opposed to doing face-to-face consultations. So that was a whole new learning, and again it was quite tough to get used to that, but then it became quite enjoyable then, and we were actually able to make very big changes to people. We had some athletes who were in long-term rehab, kind of going into their end stage at the time of the lockdown, and video rehab and consultations allowed us to continue to see those athletes through those last few stages into their actual return to full training or full capacity. So that was very rewarding.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you find that people were more or less compliant with rehab programs and things like that? And obviously at the top level, people are going to be more compliant, but with people maybe having more time on their hands and not necessarily being in work and things like that, were people able to make better progress than they ordinarily would be?
Yeah, they really were. If anything, we had athletes who could, with some of the guys with Armagh, for example, because they weren't working. These guys were able to train 2 or 3 times a day. So, and in some cases, for 1 or 2 potentially, not Armagh guys, other people, they were kind of overtraining, they were kind of doing a bit too much, and you were trying to pull them back a wee bit. So that was actually really enjoyable. You could write them kind of weekly schedules and plans where they had a an AM program and a PM program and things to do throughout the week, and we were able to make massive, huge gains in their rehab that we probably wouldn't have been able to achieve if they had been working and stuff with it. So that was a big plus. I think the video consultations, there are challenges as well to it. There were some clients who were not used to it, had no experience of it. So there was a little bit of a barrier there that we had to break down to reassure clients as to the value of the consultations. And in some cases we give clients kind of a free taster session to see what they felt. And the vast majority of those clients then did take up the option of actually going ahead and doing more consultations, and then actually got a lot out of it, and we're delighted that they actually called and made contact. So other clients just don't enjoy it. They're kind of used to more the traditional hands-on physiotherapy and manual therapy, which we do use, but those clients just didn't get it at all. So yeah, it was. Overall, I think it has been very rewarding. I think at the minute we are, from a physiotherapy perspective in private practice, we are now permitted to do more. Well, there are some relaxation of the guidelines that we can do more face-to-face, but we've got very strict guidelines around that. So not everyone is coming in for bits and pieces.
So tell us what people can expect when they arrive at Kingsbridge then.
Yeah, so the process we have. So if anyone calls up for a consultation, they have to have a mandatory telephone triage call, and that's everyone across the board. And based on that triage call, we'll take a history from them. We'll be able to decipher whether or not their presentation qualifies within the guidelines set out by the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy and the Public Health Authority in Northern Ireland. So the issues have to be urgent, they have to be emergency cases, and there's other guidelines that we have to follow. So based on that conversation, we will also outline the risks of coming in, if they want to do a face-to-face, coming into the department, so that they have all the information they need they have to consent, they have to make an informed decision and consent to the treatment. We have spent a lot of time and energy ensuring that we have upgraded our hygiene practices to what's expected in the guidelines. We wear full PPE, so we wear a mask, visor, earpin gloves. Everything will be wiped down pre and post session. The clients wear a face mask as well. The way we work at Queen's PC is we'll meet the client a physio will meet the client at the entrance, and we'll do their COVID screening questions at the front entrance. We'll also do a temperature check, and it's only if the screening questions are normal and the temperature check is normal is the client then permitted to enter the facility. So obviously if there's any risk, if they're symptomatic, or if they fail in any of the questionnaire, then they're not permitted in the building. So we've developed a one-way system in Queen's as well. So we try to limit patient-to-patient contact where possible. So patients shouldn't really be coming within the 2 meter social distancing. So so look, it's again that's taken a lot of time and energy. We've got that in place now, and we just got word the other day that we're pretty confident we're going to be back at Queen's PC from next week onwards, which we're delighted about. At the minute we'll be doing face-to-face at different locations, so we're glad to get our back into the base there with the excellent facility that they have. So yeah, we're looking forward to that.
And so from your perspective, like I suppose, do you feel safe yourself within the working environment then, that that you're well protected and that the patients are well protected?
We do, yeah. I mean, as long as we follow the guidelines, and as long as we stay quite disciplined with that. Like I was talking to someone the other day from a different organisation, and he felt they had actually 1 or 2 cases of COVID within their practice, and he himself felt the week or 2 or 3 before that he could see things starting to slip and become complacent regarding PPE and hand washing and hygiene and just structures. So I think, like, obviously COVID is still out there, it hasn't gone away. So I think as long as everyone in the organisation is quite strict on following the procedures precisely as we lay it out, and we don't get complacent, and we do all that, then we're confident we've mitigated the risks to the best of our ability. Obviously, look, you never know what's going to happen. And again, it goes back to regarding the patient. Again, we're never in our power to protect the patients. If anyone that calls for a face-to-face, fails their risk assessment, or if they have any underlying health problems, again, we will spend that telephone triage call, to ensure that we have all the information. If anyone has any health issues like that, they will not be allowed to come in. And even if they do request a face-to-face and they really want a face-to-face, we just will not be permitting them to come in for that. We'll be offering them a video consultation. So
yeah, that's very reassuring, I'm sure, for the public. So I want to sort of move away from the current pandemic and to talk about yourself a wee bit. So you're from County Monaghan originally. Can you tell us a bit about your own sporting background and maybe how you got involved with physiotherapy?
Yeah, so I originally from County Monaghan, so my own club would be Monaghan Harps. Predominantly my sporting involvement would have been in GAA and Gaelic football. So I played for my club, and then I played for my county at minor, on 21 and senior level for a couple of seasons. Won a Sigerson with Jordanstown in 2008. I don't want to say that too loud, so keep that low enough. But yeah, no, I think that kind of led on to my kind of motivation to become involved in physiotherapy, because I had ambitions as a sportsman to try to reach the very top in GAA, and it just didn't actually make it that far to that level. And almost like the next best thing was to get involved in sports physiotherapy, because that would then be a pathway into elite sport. And that's what happened. We eventually got to work for Exeter Chiefs and work for Munster Rugby, and you end up we were in stadiums like the Aviva Stadium, and worked in Twickenham over in England at a big game with 80,000 people there. So whenever you walk onto the field in that environment and you hear the atmosphere, that's where you wanted to get there eventually. So I think other things that kind of guided me towards physiotherapy was when I was studying in physiotherapy in Jordanstown. They had a very good, you have the Institute the Sports Institute of Northern Ireland based in Jordanstown. So you have, around that time, they had some superb physiotherapists like Phil Glasgow, who's now the head of rehab and physio with RFU, Chris McNichol, who's now the Ulster head physio. So you had 4 or 5 top physiotherapists, and I was an athlete in Sinai, so I was being treated by those guys. So that did inspire me to get involved in physiotherapy and then sports physiotherapy. I was lucky enough to then, when I did graduate, to work in Sinai as a soft tissue therapist. I wasn't a physiotherapist, and I was a soft tissue therapist for around 12 months. And again, that gave me access to these physios and to just basically watch how they work and operate. And that really did inspire me to get involved. And I would encourage any physiotherapist who's currently studying or is just qualified to try to reach out to someone who's got experience in their certain field. It doesn't have to be sports physio, but whatever discipline they want to get involved in, and to kind of learn from them and just be a sponge of these people, and kind of see how they operate and talk to them about career pathways and stuff, because that can be hugely influential on the pathway you take. So yeah.
So tell us, you mentioned a couple of the very significant jobs you've had in the past working in professional sport. Suppose, like at the start, how do you get a job working for Munster Rugby or Exeter Chiefs? I assume these things aren't advertised in the paper, or maybe they are. I don't know. Like, how does it come about that you get offered a job like that?
I mean, the regarding Exeter Chiefs, like I was just desperate to work in pro sport, and I recall just getting the email addresses of every head of medical, head physio of every rugby league club in England, every rugby union club in England, and a professional soccer club, and sent posted out CVs to every single one of them, applied for jobs. And then the Exeter Chiefs post came up, and I'll be brutally honest, I didn't know much about Exeter Chiefs at the time. They were only just promoted to the Premiership. Went for the role of senior physio and got it. And I have to say that was fantastic experience. You know, it really did accelerate my skills on and my experience on to that level. And around that time as well, I did know a few of the guys in Munster Rugby and heard there was a post coming up as initially I thought it was a senior physio, but I didn't know the lead post was coming up. And again, applied, probably borderline pestered them about jobs and what was going on, and emails. And eventually the role came up, and they contacted me and said, look, this role has come up. Would you be interested? And I went for it and got it. So I think it is. I think it is quite challenging, especially physiotherapists who are based here, to get jobs in pro sport, because they are very few of them over here. It's either one of the 4 provinces or the Sports Institute or whatever it may be. There's very few jobs here, so a lot of physios and even S&C coaches and sports scientists from here probably have to travel across the water to get experience at that level. So it's and you know, for me as well, it was a first shot to nothing, because we just got married about a few months before that. We got married in May, and I went over to Exeter in August time. So you can imagine that was a fairly hot conversation with my new wife. Didn't get on very well. So look, we're up and we're leaving. So that took a few long conversations to kind of get her to agree to go over. And you are going into the unknown. You know, I went over there, and the salary was pretty low at that time. You are taking a bit of a risk, but you do have to sometimes take a punt at some of these things, and obviously you need to weigh up the risks, but you do have to kind of go for it. And if you feel like you're in any way ready for the post, you know, kind of put yourself out there. Again, with the lead physio job at Munster, you know, I felt I had enough experience at that time to go for that role, and went for it. Spoke to people beforehand and went for it and got it. So it's just a bit back on yourself, really, and don't be kind of afraid. You know, you'll be a long time regretting something if you never actually go for it.
So assume within, say, like the Munster rule, for example, if you're the lead physio for a professional sports team, that there's quite a lot of like managerial responsibilities involved in that too, that there must be a significant team under you that you're then overseeing and directing, rather than necessarily getting people on the table and throughout the day, or maybe it's a mixture of the two.
It was whenever I went to Munster, we basically had a new physio team, so there was a fair amount of work involved in recruiting staff. But yeah, when you're the lead physiotherapist, you do need to be highly organised in your time management, because there is a lot of managerial work, especially when you work for a provincial team. There's a lot of conversations, communication have to happen between the provinces and the RFU, so there's a huge amount of crossover there. So you just cannot spend as much time as you were, say, if you're a senior physiotherapist or junior, with the players. You have to delegate. You have to delegate tasks to them. I was lucky enough to hire some very good physios, to be involved in hiring some very good physios around that time, who were excellent, and who were autonomous practitioners, and they could work away, and it was a fairly enjoyable place to work. They also had a very good strength and conditioning team as well, who were very much involved in the rehab process. So they were actually very good at. There was a lot of collaboration between ourselves, the medical and the S&C. So you do need to, if you go in there as a lead physiotherapist, you're almost like trying to manage different departments and trying to bring them all together for the players' benefit. But no, that was a hugely enjoyable time down there.
So like obviously Munster Rugby is one of the most iconic brands in Irish sport, and you know it's there's a lot of positive sentiment out there around Ireland and further afield for Munster Rugby. I know, like my own dad almost that's his number one rugby team, like, you know, despite being from Belfast, like. And so what's it like when you walk through something which you know, the team that played the All Blacks, and, you know, when you walk through the door on the first day and you see all these household names, do you take a minute to kind of look around and think, wow, I've achieved something here? Or is it like roll the sleeves up and get straight to work?
Oh no, I was shaking the boots for about the first 2 or 3 weeks, because there were, when I was growing up as a player, you know, Munster were who I looked at for inspiration. You know, Paul O'Connell and Pierre Mahoney and these guys, and Anthony Foley, who was then the manager. So I was completely starstruck for the first number of weeks, and one of the first guys I had to treat was Paul O'Connell. You know, and you can imagine, you know, it took a number of weeks to eventually get calm down and start to get into your normal way of working once you get over that, you know, being starstruck and all the rest of it. So, look, it was immensely proud to work for Munster. Something you can always look back on, and something you can always have really good memories. You know, the players down there were also great. You know, despite the fact they were household names, they were also very humble, very respectful of staff and physios. And there's no, I just think it could be an Irish thing, or it could be a Limerick thing. There was definitely no one within the Munster camp that was allowed to get above their station too much, and the senior players group had a way of controlling that. I think, you know, I think meeting people like Paul O'Connell and Pierre Mahoney and these guys and Keith Earls, it was just a fantastic experience. I never met as one of my first weeks. It was the first or second week down there. I remember Kerry were playing Mayo in Limerick in a replayed game. I don't know if you remember that game. It was the game was a bit of a schmozzle, and I remember talking to Paul O'Connell, you know, with interest in GAA and stuff. And he rang me the morning of the game and told me, you know, where are you? And I've 2 tickets to this game if you want to come to the game. And I was completely, you know, I couldn't believe what was going on. I was going to a game with Paul O'Connell. So, and I met him, and we walked down, you know, where the Gaelic grounds are. There's quite narrow side streets, and I was walking beside him, and everyone was stopping photographs and stuff. And, you know, then we sat and watched the game. And that was just his way of, you know, a new member of staff, you know, bringing them in, making them feel as part of the team, making them feel comfortable in the environment. But that was certainly a day I'll not forget, sitting beside him for. And it was a great game as well. Great game. It was a great game. Yeah, it was great.
So obviously we've talked about some of the rugby teams that you work with, and we mentioned earlier that you work with Armagh. I know personal favorite of mine in your past is work with the Belfast Giants, and so, like, obviously you're working with athletes with a lot of different professional sporting backgrounds, and like, what are the differences in treating those athletes, either in terms of attitude, physically, what their motivations and targets are, or within the organizations that they play for?
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, that's a big question.
I think when you compare like professional athletes, like if you compare the Belfast Giants to Armagh, for example, or Munster, so there's a lot of, you have to be very much aware of the psychology of the athletes. So, you know, if you're with the Belfast Giants, you know, the nature of ice hockey, especially in the IHL, there's, you know, the contracts are 1-year contracts. They're quite rolling. You know, some of them are pay for play and stuff. So if you're talking to an ice hockey athlete and explaining to him that he has a potentially career-ending, you know, a season-ending injury, or even an injury that's going to last more than 2 or 3 or 4 months, that to him means he could be heading out the door. You know, he's going to a new club, or he may, when he had an athlete who literally just arrived from Canada with a month or so, and he had a 6-month contract, and he suffered a really severe ankle injury on maybe a second or third week training that was going to take around 3 or 4 months of rehab. And he was literally, when he came in, wife and kids flew over from Canada, this massive injury, and then you're telling this guy about the injury, you could see his face dropping, and he was thinking, right, I could be going to a new club here, and maybe, you know, so that's pressure of a different scale, off the Richter type scale. That's real life pressure for these guys. And as a physio, you have to be absolutely on the money regarding precision of your communication about what the diagnosis is, your body language, what words you use and terminology. You need to be careful. You need to be sure you have the diagnosis correct. There's a really good backroom team there of sports docs and physio. So you need to make sure you've everything in line before you speak to them, and then you do have to really support them as well, during that period, because this is a hugely negative psychological impact on these guys, and you have to be aware of the mentality of them during the rehab process, because if they're depressed about the injury, or there's huge anxiety levels, that can all feed into their recovery and the sleep and their energy levels and their compliance with physio. So that's the same in professional rugby. You may have an athlete who you're rehabbing, and these guys could be worth millions to the club. So you need to ensure that the rehab is absolutely it's on the money, because these are hugely valuable personnel for the club. I think when you move over, when you compare to the GAA landscape, obviously if you're telling a guy with a significant injury, they don't have that pressure of careers and stuff, but there still is huge connotations for long-term injuries for these guys. I think when you compare the athletes life for life from the pro game to the amateur game, I think the GAA, some of the GAA athletes I work with are ultra professional, off the scale professional, who could easily walk into any professional team, rugby or soccer, and survive in that environment, because they're just so precise and so dedicated. There's a few guys in Armagh you could think of, you probably know it for yourself. You don't want to name names, but they are, just ultimate professionals. So, and if anything, they're probably more professional than some of the guys who are in the professional game. I've seen a few guys in rugby. You're kind of looking at going, these guys actually really taking this seriously, or whether it's diet, or whether it's the rehab compliance, or whether it's whatever it may be. The GAA guys and they do deserve huge amounts of credit for the level of professionalism that is in the game now, and balancing that with family and work and everything else. So so I think, I don't know, did that answer your question to some extent?
No, absolutely. So what was within the context of working, I suppose, either in professional sport or maybe in Queens or in Gaelic games, what was the most difficult injury that you ever treated, and was there a successful outcome for the athlete?
Yeah, I think two come to mind. So one was when I was at Munster, was Tommy O'Donnell, who was a back row with Munster, and in 2015 he suffered a posterior hip dislocation, so a complete hip dislocation, playing for Ireland against Wales in a warm-up game, and it was a horrendous injury. And what stood out to me at that time was something I had never come across before, nor ever heard of it happening in a rugby field or a soccer field. Or it was such a type of injury when it happens in kind of road traffic accidents. It was so severe.
So what actually happens in that case to the hip? Is there a posterior dislocation is that it pops out in a certain direction, or it just pops out, or
it was Tommy was essentially, the way he landed was he was almost on all fours on the ground, scrambling for a ball, and he was trapped between someone else, and a guy landed on his back. So his hip, if you can imagine what happens then, you do the splits, you're on your knees, and the hip joint just basically went back. So it's almost like the hip joint, the hip itself, the femur came out of the socket posteriorly, so went back out of the joint. So you can imagine the force that's required to actually do that. And he didn't have a hip problem before this. This is the new injury. So hugely traumatic. You damaged the joint, damaged different bits and pieces. So so that was fairly severe. There was a lot of, it was quite a worrying time as well around that time, because, and obviously as well, you do get very attached to these guys, within limit. You have to obviously keep your distance between players and professionally, but you do have you really like these guys, and I felt really bad for Tommy at that time, because we were concerned that this may be something that may affect his career long term. But thankfully, and just through huge work from the whole team down there in medical and SSC, we got Tommy back to play in 5 months, which was, we were anticipating 6, 7, 8 months. We got him back way ahead of schedule, came back to play, and was perfect, and has had no problems since that. So to go from that scenario where a guy's been carried off the field, potentially incurring an injury, to 5 months he's back in the field playing away and smashing people and looking really good, that was just, that kind of makes being involved in sports physio all worthwhile. It's those kind of moments, and he was very thankful to ourselves after that about the work we did and stuff, and he put an article in the paper and stuff, which is very nice to see as well. Like too much of that, but it's nice to kind of see those comments that people appreciate what you do. The other injury that was really scary was when I was at Exeter. We had a big second row. He was who had a head injury. He had a direct impact to the top of his head. And whenever we went on to him on the field, his first words were, "Lads, I can't feel my arms and legs. I can't move." And we were, we couldn't believe it. And I remember the doc. We had our head doctor was a consultant in A&E, and he looked at me, and we knew by the look, this is a really serious situation here, So, when I was maintaining control of the C-spine, and during that time he started to cry, and he thought he was paralyzed, So, so you're trying to put the anxiety and the emotional aside to try to do your job correctly and think about what the process needs to be. And thankfully, by the time we got him boarded off on the spinal board and back to the changing room, he got to the hospital, he started to get some feeling back in his legs and his feet and his arms, and it turned out that he had like a form of temporary paralysis, so whereby he took such an impact that his spinal cord was basically rattled within the spinal canal. That caused everything to shut down, but it came back eventually, and he made a full recovery. So that was one that you went from a situation which was complete devastation and traumatic for a guy to then recovering well. So yeah, those type of injury. I mean, Paul O'Connell's injury when he tore his hamstring off the bone as well, which effectively ended his career. That was really devastating for him. That was a horrible injury at a stage in his career, which he had surgery, but unfortunately couldn't come back from. So these are ones. It's almost like those injuries where they have such an effect on the player at a certain stage of the career. You kind of really feel for them. And you just have to do whatever is in your power and whatever in the whole team's power to get them back as quickly as you can,
Yeah. So see, when you run onto a field in that kind of trauma situation and someone has landed on their head and they can't move, is there a certain instinct that kicks in for you as a medical professional, where kind of all of your training takes over and you're in the zone about all the processes that you have to follow?
Yeah, as I remember when I first went to Exeter. And I hadn't worked in rugby a lot at that time. When I first went over there, the first few occasions on the field, it's absolute chaos. The noise and there's so much going on. And in rugby, medics can run on; they don't have to wait for a pause in play. So I remember one of my first game or two, I was just rabbit in the headlights stuff. There was just so much going on, and there was a senior physio there and a lead physio who then were able to guide me through. And it just does take you a while to be able to calm down and think rationally in that situation. But then as you get more and more experienced, you do find when you're in that situation, you are just in the present moment. You're completely relaxed, and you're able to rationalize out, because you do have to really think very, very quickly in those. You may only have a minute, 2 minutes on the field, but you may have to make very quick decisions as to whether or not you have to diagnose first of all what's going on, because you could have a really significant injury, meaning the guy has to come off the field, or this could be something they can play. So you have to be able to, to use your hand correctly, to assess correctly. You've got a coach in your ear screaming with the earpiece going, "Is he fit? Do we have to get a sub on?" Sometimes I would just have to flick it out because you just couldn't concentrate. There's so much going on. There's crowd screaming, and the game is still going on. The players are going around. There's 3 times I was assessing the guy. I had to crouch over him because the play was coming that way, just in case they fell on top. You also have to be quite careful running on the field. I made that mistake once where I went on to a player, and then as I was actually maintaining his neck position, and as I was maintaining his neck, he just jumped up and ran off, and And at that time, the play started to come over, and sometimes you can get off, but the way the play came over, I was just caught, couldn't get out. And I think it's still on. You still see reruns of this, one of these embarrassing rugby moments where I got caught and a player kicked my bag off and it was a complete mess. But yeah, thankfully it only happened once, so it hasn't happened again. But yeah, you do, and it's only something that physios and medics learn with experience and getting on the field. You know, some of as physios, you have to pass pit side trauma courses and qualifications, and in some of those programs, they're actually very good at putting you in situations and firing questions at you really quickly, because you have to think on your feet and think in a stress situation, and that does help upskill you to manage, because you can be dealing with really significant injuries, really severe, even medical issues, guys with kidney injuries and stuff like that you don't normally think of a musculoskeletal problem. A guy with a lacerated kidney at Exeter as well. We had to get off the field. So yeah, it does. But it's enjoyable as well. You do enjoy making those big decisions and getting them right, and then feeling like you've done a good job getting the player safely off the field.
Would you get nervous before a match? At a professional level, or even with Armagh now, do you get the butterflies in the tummy, like, about wanting to make sure your own performance is
absolutely
yeah,
absolutely. You have to be, you do have to be, you really have to be on top on your game whenever you're in that environment. I mean, you do enjoy games, and that's why I think a lot of physios work in sport. I think if you can't enjoy that atmosphere and of a huge game and the crowd, I think you're probably in the wrong game. I think that's why we're all there. We still like, it's a buzz, and I think you do, and I think you're part of a team as well when you're on the sideline, and you enjoy the victories as well. So yeah, you do get a bit nervous, but you can control it now.
So maybe just for the last question here, just to step away from the professional environment, and there are a lot of people that are getting back to sport some way or another during this lockdown period, and I suppose with the summer coming up, that's going to be extended as well, with maybe people who are like teachers, whatever, who aren't working through the summer, and there are people who are having a laugh about this, like myself, who overextended themselves in the first couple of weeks. So I suppose, do you have advice out there for people to avoid injuries which maybe they wouldn't necessarily be thinking about? So people getting out to running, people cycling, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think it's very topical at the minute, because we now have a lot of sports who are in the realm of going back to playing now, whether it's hockey, rugby, football, GAA. So a lot of that is now the key factor now is, for example, of the GAA, for example, we have a lot of club players going back to play in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We have a lot of guys who up to this point have been doing road runs and straight line stuff, and maybe running 5Ks and stuff. But really it's about coaches and the athletes being incredibly careful in their planning over the next number of weeks, because you have to. What you need to avoid is a massive spike in your training load. So we need it. So in athletic performance, they use the principle of progressive overload, which just means that you use gradual but small increases in load, but over a period of time. So it has to be gradual. And one thing that we know from sports science is there's we have the acute and chronic workload ratio, which is a system whereby we can monitor your training load, because we know that these spikes, really high spikes in training load, can lead to injury, and also sometimes if those spikes are preceded by a trough or by drops in your load. So I think if you're involved in a team, or if you're a coach with a team, I think it's vitally important that you have people around you who understand these principles. And if you don't have anyone in your backroom team who doesn't understand these things, you're best to kind of reach out to, whether it's a sports physio in your local area or an athletic performance coach, to really plan out these next number of weeks on return to play. Because guys are going to go from, I know in some places players may have to play maybe 2 or 3 games in a short period of time. Championships might be played off in a short window. you may have players who are involved in 2 or 3 different teams. So there needs to be a huge crossover of communication between different coaches. So I think it's all about trying to coordinate how you're going to incorporate different components of running and of performance. So, for example, someone who's been running 5Ks or just straight line runs for the last 12 weeks, they probably haven't been exposed to any high speed run, any sprint work whatsoever. They may not have done any change of direction work or any deceleration work. So it's when we go back to train, it's important that work is implemented slowly into the program and at a certain amount. And that's again where progressive overload comes in, where we actually want athletes to be exposed to sprint work and to high speed running, but not to the point where they go overload and they can break down. Like we see in some of the recent data around in the Bundesliga and stuff like that, that have gone back over the last 4 or 5 weeks. Their injury rate per game has increased, for every week that they've been back. And before the lockdown, it was 0.27. It's now, I think, an average of 0.65 injuries per game. So you're talking there, that's a professional team with a huge backroom staff, with sports science, every aspect that you need to keep players in the field, and they're having big injury spikes. The league is the same. Seen Arsenal last night, had 2 guys off in the first half with injuries. So I would be quite fearful, to be honest, for some of the athletes going back now, and I just would, just with the amount of load they're going to have to get through over this short period of time. So you just hope that coaches are responsible in how they put their training load together and how they factor all that in. And there's lots of different tools they can use. When a team comes back in, the key thing is to test your squad and test your players. So you can use things like the Bronco test, which looks at aerobic capacity of the squad, which will give you an over idea of how fit these guys are. And if guys are way off the pace, they need to do extra work to get up to speed, whether that's gym work or the training sessions. And then you can tailor your training program to what those guys are able to do. So, and I think with running as well, just with people who are involved in athletics and stuff, again, it comes back to being clever about your training plan. Some of the running apps like Strava and Garmin are very good at allowing people to see what runs they did and over what time frame. So that then allows you to periodize or plan your running so that you have enough recovery, so that then you can manipulate different parameters. So you may actually go for more distance in one running session, or you may add in a speed session. But then if you increase your speed, you need to reduce your volume, and vice versa. So I think it's just, in a nutshell, it's just about trying to plan, try to periodize quite well, and try to use as many people with knowledge in the field as you possibly can to ensure the welfare of the players, because ultimately what we don't want to see a raft of guys coming out of here, going back to play with big serious injuries that affects them, affects their work and affects their lives and gets injured. So
yeah. So I mean, you've already sort of hinted at this in your previous answer, but and not to put you on the spot, but do you feel that this period of time, which particularly has been allowed for in Gaelic games and probably in trying to finish some of the local soccer leagues, do you think that this lead-in period is long enough? I have kind of a guess at what I think your answer will be.
So I don't know. I don't think it's. I think if coaches are clever in how they plan, I think they can mitigate risk to an extent. It is a very short time window. You're looking at potentially 4 weeks between when club players can go back to train, and then when they play in the end of July. I think there's only a 10-day window of return to contact training, which is very short. Hugely short. I don't know how that's going to be. How you're going to work that. Do
you think that might manifest in more kind of impact injuries as people's timings are off a little bit?
100%. I would be very fearful of that. Yeah. Because as you well know, you have to condition yourself and condition your body to make it robust to withstand any stress. Contact and taking contact is a whole new ballgame, because if you haven't received any contact for the last 12, 14 weeks, if your body needs to be able to adjust to that, and that then brings in more, deceleration work, acceleration work, change of direction. As you say, your timing may be off. So when you're going to apply contact to someone, you have to use your footwork to get in the right position to hit them, to perform the technique correctly. Whereas if your timing is off and your footwork's not there, you may actually injure them or injure yourself. So yeah, look, the 10-day window, it's incredibly short. It really is. And I think even the run-in, there no doubt will be friction between county and, I know we're talking about GAA here, but county and club, there may be friction and crossover as to the players' training programs, and you may have some counties who are doing bits and pieces around this time, but not, the club's obviously the priority. So you just hope that there isn't too much crossover there, and players are having to train excessively over a short period of time relative to the huge kind of trough that they most likely had before this. So it's a very challenging job for the GAA, and you don't want to be too critical of them because you're dealing with something they've never dealt with before. And in some ways they're being commended for bringing the return date quicker, the 28th of June. In other ways, you're thinking potentially, is that too quick? It's hard. Time will tell, I think. Time will tell. Ultimately, we need to keep people safe regarding the virus. There's a lot of regulations imposed and put out there by the GAA, and you also hope that club officers and the guys who are appointed really follow those rules that are the law, because the last thing we want is for a cluster to happen within your club or a club, and that then may lead on to someone becoming very ill. So that's what we need to kind of prevent here, and if that means that training programs need to take a back seat to allow that to happen, then so be it, because obviously people's health is the most important.
Yeah. And obviously we hope that players stay fit and healthy over the coming weeks. If people do run into injury problems and they maybe want to seek out some treatment from yourself or the other staff at Kingsbridge, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or to book an appointment?
Yeah, I mean, our contact number, it's the 02890667878, and if they ring that main number, they can be put through to our physiotherapy coordinator, or if they just search for Kingsbridge Physiotherapy Clinic, they'll be able to find the email address to inquire about. We're on Facebook and social media, so there's lots of different ways of getting access to us. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. Shea, thanks very much for the conversation today. It was very enjoyable for me and hopefully very informative for the people listening, for people, members of the general public, or people who are getting back to sport in the next while. So hopefully chat to you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much. All the best, guys. Bye-bye.